You're listening to Stellar Success, Leveling Up for Medical Pros with Dr. Tudor Francu. Join us as we explore how medical professionals can achieve stellar success in all areas of life. It's time to level up.
Hi, everyone. We're at Stellar Success Podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Tudor Francu, and I have the pleasure and honor to have a good friend of mine here today, Dr. Ty House. How are you, Dr. House?
I am very good. How are you doing?
Awesome. I'm good. Thank you. So, our podcast is Stellar Success, and I tend to have the first question for my guests as what does success means to you, and what's the goal here?
So, success can mean a lot of things, but ultimately, success is having purpose in your life and fulfilling, or at least trying to fulfill that purpose, kind of moving in the direction of fulfilling your purpose.
Awesome. Obviously, professionally, you're a very accomplished individual. Do you mind kind of walk us through in a few minutes of what your story is? How did you start, and where are you now?
So right now I'm an orthopedic surgeon at Chesapeake Orthopedics, which is a division of the Center for Advanced Orthopedics. Basically, it started with my dad was an orthopedic surgeon. Growing up, people would say, "Hey, are you going to be a doctor?" And I, kept it in the back of my mind, but I was planning on being quarterback of the Baltimore Colts. And by high school, I realized that I wasn't even playing quarterback. So I went to college kind of with an open mind about what I wanted to be. So what I did was I did the pre-med courses, but I didn't major pre-med. I was actually a history major, kind of kept it in the back of my mind. And then at the end of college, junior year, I said, you know what, maybe I would go to med school, but I was very much torn between being a teacher. I wanted to be basically a JV lacrosse coach, history teacher or science teacher. And people ask, why would I want to be a JV coach? Well, I'm from Baltimore, and in Baltimore, the varsity coaches get fired. So I wanted to be a JV coach, teach kids how to play lacrosse, teach them in school, or go to med school. I couldn't really decide which one to do. So my first year out of college, I actually applied to both. I applied to be a high school teacher and applied to med schools. And I got more med school offers than I did teacher offers. So I got in, and I got in the fall and spent the winter as a chairlift operator in Beaver Creek, Colorado, and then started med school at University of Maryland. I went there for 4 years, and then I went to University of Texas in Galveston for my orthopedics. Went to Louisville in Kentucky for my hand surgery, and then came back to the Baltimore area. And I've been with Chesapeake for a little over 20 years now.
Wow.
So I liked
amazing.
every step. I liked Maryland for med school. I liked Texas for residency, and I loved my fellowship in Kentucky.
Awesome, man. That's a great professional career, and you're very well known in the community here. And I wanted to kind of segue into your professional wins a little bit and tell me, what do you think it would be considered a big win for you professionally over the years, and how did you deal with that?
So I would honestly say the biggest professional win. I'm very proud of my practice, first of all. One of my partners is one of my best friends growing up. One of my other partners is another great friend who is my other partner's uncle. So I've known his family his whole life. It's funny, he's a little bit older than me, so he was off doing his medical training when I was more in my teenage years, but I knew all of his brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews. And then those were our core partners when we kind of rebuilt our group. And then we added another partner, Dr. Bear. So that's Dr. Klepper was the one I grew up with, Dr. Donovan's his uncle, and Dr. Bear. And that was our core group. And now we've added other guys, Dr. Valji and Dr. Haymaker. But that core group of the three of us, and then ultimately Dr. Bear was the group that got the practice very successful. So I am proud of that. But when you say the one thing I'm the biggest, most proud of would be our surgery center, probably. So where you and I met, and well, we met before that, but worked together. That was a huge change for not just my career, but having autonomy over my practice, having more time with my family, all those things. I mean, it was a game changer for my life. So I would say, looking back after 20 years, that was the number one thing.
Awesome. Yeah, indeed. That was a big win professionally. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously to get to the level where you are right now professionally in general in the community, you also took a lot of risks, I imagine. And I want to kind of know and pick your brain of what risk mean to you, and if you are willing to take them. Do you deal with getting out of the comfort zone really easily, or how do you see these things for yourself?
It's kind of funny. Some of my early risks, I don't think I was mature enough to even realize they were risks, So like making that decision to say, hey, I'm gonna be pre-med, or not be pre-med, but take pre-med classes. It didn't really worry me. And the thought of like, oh, I'll try to get into med school, see what happens. I think a lot of people nowadays, I see a lot of young med students, people trying to get into med school. Sometimes it's pretty stressful. I was not that stressed. I was kind of like, I'm going to try to get into med school, but I was very confident that if it didn't work out, I would keep applying, add to my resume, and make it work out. Or if I chose a different career path, I was confident that I would be successful at that. And then when I got into medical school, I was a little naive. I think I thought that you could really be whatever you wanted to be. I wasn't quite as aware as probably I should have been that certain specialties were way harder to get into. And
Right.
it was the same thing with orthopedics. I was like, hey, I'm going to apply to orthopedics. We'll see what happens. I hope I get in. And that's a risk. That's a risk to apply to orthopedics. People don't get
Yeah.
into orthopedics, but I was young and I was just like, oh, it'll be fine. It'll work out. If I don't get into orthopedics, I'm sure I'll find something else I like. So I think I should have been more stressed about some of those decisions than I should have been.
Yeah.
And then the other risk was, I think, in my practice was kind of moving back to Maryland. The medical situation in Maryland was not as good as other states. My wife was from Texas. I worked in Texas, enjoyed Texas. And honestly, the starting salaries in Texas or other states were way higher than Maryland. But we decided to come back to Maryland, and there was some risk there. And that was kind of probably the first time I felt pressure in my career to be like,
Hmm.
I need this practice to succeed.
Right.
Because it would be a lot easier in other states. And ultimately,
Yeah.
I think it's worked out great here, but I had to be a little bit more patient than maybe I would have been other places.
Interesting. Yeah. No, I agree with you. There are very few people who are moving from Texas to Maryland. I
Yes.
agree with
Yeah.
that.
Well, and when you
Um,
do residency and some of your co-residents are just moving to small town Texas and you see what they're being offered to be
yeah.
just the person in small town Texas, it is a huge difference. You have to have confidence in yourself that you're going to be successful in Maryland. And
Yes.
that was the first time like I said, that was the first time I was like, "Ooh, I better make this work."
Yeah. That's interesting. Obviously, to be successful, you need to know how to deal with failures, right? And you can be successful without failing. Um, was there any time in your life or professional career where you had moments that didn't go well, or something went wrong? And how did you deal with that?
So we in our practice professionally, we had a time, I forget if it was 10, 15 years ago, where we were just kind of the wrong size practice. So our group's been around for 50 years. It was very successful. And then we were just too big for the number of people we had. We had too much space. We had too many bad contracts. We had management issues, and some of the older guys retired or left to become hospital based. And that's where it left myself, Dr. Donovan, and Dr. Klepper. And that was some pressure to either just close up shop or try to fix it from the inside out. And then we very quickly hired Dr. Bear, and we turned it around. And that was a huge failure in that it got to that point, and then kind of like the obstacle is the way, it became our greatest success.
Yeah.
And was it luck? We ended up hiring an amazing manager who was way overqualified for the job and helped us through. And sometimes I think it was luck, but I think part of it was that our core group of 4 guys were very easy to get along with. Patients liked them. They had big volumes, and we had all the tools to turn it around. And the reason the manager joined us is because it's rare to have an orthopedic practice where everybody got along pretty well.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
think she,
interesting.
yeah, I don't think she would have done it if it was a problematic group where there was a lot of infighting, a lot of distrust, and those kind of things.
Yeah. It seems you are very consistent and persistent with your goals of succeeding in this practice over the years.
Yeah.
Um, was there any specific like skill or habit that you developed over time to make you succeed?
So I think basically perseverance, kind of sticking with it. And I've thought about that. When I was in high school, actually, the head of the school would say one word about each student. And my word in my senior yearbook was actually perseverance. And I think that had to do with academic things, athletic things. But for whatever reason, I just have always been able to stick with it, you know? So,
Yeah,
and
that's
I think now that I'm older, I like my kids to know that, like, when I was in first grade, everybody had a red reading book. I had a blue one. The blue one was the slow reader. You know, I didn't talk till I was 3. I was not the fast reader. When I was in the 9th grade, they had a general science course, and if you did well on it, you were in sequential sciences, and sequential sciences were for everybody who thought they might want to go into medical school or the sciences. Well,
uh-huh.
I did not qualify to get into sequential sciences. So I was a late bloomer, and I
Yeah.
just stuck with it academically, and I think that you can accomplish a lot if you're just persistent,
Yeah,
have
that's
perseverance. And, now they talk about it all the time. They call it grit and those kind of things.
right.
But I think I just had some of that.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're a perfect example of someone who, they say motivation gets you started, but persistence and consistency get you there, right? So it's interesting how, someone like you that came and overcome a lot of issues initially succeeded that much and that fast. Um, Kind of segue into someone who would start right now. What would you say to a young guy who comes out of school, wants to do medicine? What would be your advice for him?
Well, my first advice would be don't rush it. Is that you have time to build your resume. So if you're a freshman, and this happens a lot, freshmen in college, they get there, maybe the grades aren't great, and they go to their advisor, and their advisor says, well, what else are you going to do with your life? Well, a lot of people say, oh, okay, I'm going to do something else. I can't get into med school. It's only your freshman year. You have plenty of time to do better, even after college. I had a friend in medical school who he was 10 years older than me, but he did not do well his freshman year in college, left college, stayed out of college for many years, went back to college and crushed it and ended up being a doctor. So if that's your dream, don't give it up on it early. But the one thing
Awesome.
I worry about, if you read anything, it's all about physician burnout. And I worry that we're burning out kids before they even
Hmm.
become physicians. Like we're burning them out in college. I feel like when I went to med school, it was more like, are your grades good enough? And is your MCAT, which is your standardized test, if they're at a certain level, the volunteering is kind of fluff. If your grades are good enough and your MCATs were good enough, you got in. Well, now they want so much stuff with that resume that I feel like some
Yeah.
of these kids are going to be burned out before they even start. And then if you want to get into a good residency, you got to do a ton of research sometimes, even though
Yeah.
that might not be your thing. So that would be my one thing I would really say is be cautious about getting burned out. Don't burn yourself out before you start.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a great advice, actually, because it's a long term, right? It's a marathon.
Oh
It's not
yeah,
a sprint.
yeah.
Although
Well,
you love sprints, though.
yeah, yeah. There are things that will sort of burn you out in
Yeah,
practice, like things you're gonna have to deal with. So don't come in already burned out. Like that would be bad, you know.
yeah,
And those things that tend to burn you out, as you become more successful, you can work your way around it. And we all look at these like physician sites and people complain about the different things. And a lot of times you're like, well, that's something I totally avoid because I delegate it. I don't
right.
do some of those things because I know they will burn me out. So I'm like, oh, I'm avoiding that. Now, some of it is inevitable, but that's what it is.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. I want to kind of switch gears a little bit. You're obviously an accomplished doctor right now, and it's not only about medical profession, right? In your life, you do a lot of other things. You have hobbies, you have a family, and I know your passion is about fitness and nutrition. So I want to kind of ask you and tell the audience what's your perspective on being a complete human being outside of your medical profession, day after day. What do you do? How does your day look like? What do you do to maintain yourself, to get in good health, eat well, and stuff like that?
Well, that's a big question.
It
So,
is. It is.
uh, so basically, what my day looks like when I'm kind of dialed in. So, like a typical week would be the weekday. I pref- so I go to bed like sometime around 9:30 to 10. Like I used to be 10:30 ish. Now it's funny. I'm going to bed even earlier because I like waking up earlier. So I like waking up between 5:30 and 6. And generally, I sit on the couch, which is like right there, and I usually have one cup of coffee while I will listen to a video or part of a podcast, something like that, usually something educational. And then
Hmm.
I actually meditate. And I used to meditate for like 10 minutes. Sometimes I'll meditate for 30 minutes. And then I kind of grab a second cup of coffee and I'll either read whatever book I'm reading or do another like podcast kind of video or something. I used to work out in the morning, but now that I'm an empty nester, I actually have time to work out when I get home. And that
Yeah.
means that if I work out really hard, what would happen is I'd work out really hard and then I'd kind of get kind of stiff and tired in the car. And then it would be, tiring walking up the steps when I went to work. And I would also, if I had something I had to do in the morning and I missed a workout, it would be more stressful for me. So that's why I kind of do a low key wind into the day. And then, at surgery center days, I'm there at 7. Office days, I'm there at 8, and I work until 4, which is great hours. I've gotten to the point in my career where I don't have to take a lot of calls, so that's opened up a lot of free time. I come home at 4. I say I'm going to work out right away. I usually don't. I take like a 10-minute nap, and I am literally the king of napping. And I can take a 10-minute nap, 20-minute nap, feel great, and that's when I work out. And then I have dinner, and then with my family. So right now, my younger daughter, who graduated from college, is home with us, and it's summer. So my youngest son, who's a college student, is home with us. But we usually all eat together. But sometimes it's just my wife and I. And then after dinner in the summer, we're always back outside again. Like we're hiking, we're walking with the dogs, we're taking the dogs down to the water and letting them run around. And then I come home in the winter, usually like maybe watch like one Netflix show, but in the summer, basically read and go to bed and get up and do it again. And I basically try to work out every day. Um,
Yeah.
I kind of believe in no days off, but that doesn't mean that my workout won't just be a short hike with the dogs or a walk with the dogs. I try to do something pretty much every day. It's pretty rare. Maybe I have meetings that go late or something like that I can't work out, but that's a huge like stress reliever for me. It makes me feel normal, so I like
Yeah.
doing that. The nutrition thing is funny because that has evolved over time. Like I would say I always had an eye on nutrition and I always failed. And when we were growing up, like you thought you were eating healthy and you weren't because you were following all the right advice and it was all the horrible advice. But in general, once I got married and we got married pretty young, I was 24. My wife always ate healthy, so breakfast and dinner were fine. But what I found at the hospital or in between hospitals was a disaster.
Right.
Uh,
The
so
hospital lounges were
yeah. So now when I'm
terrible.
dialed in, I have a healthy breakfast, I have a healthy dinner, and then whatever left over from dinner is my healthy lunch the next day. And my big thing is like, if I'm going to eat junk, so let's say if I'm going to eat pizza, I want to be eating good pizza at a pizzeria with my family. I don't want to eat pizza lying around the office. If I'm going to
Right.
eat cakes or whatever, it's going to be a celebration. That doesn't mean I won't grab a donut at the surgery center a certain day, but in general, I can stay away from that kind of stuff. Um,
Awesome.
so I'm always experimenting with it, and it's funny. I've kind of over the years, probably 10, 15 years, I've tried like all these little things, more of a test to myself to see what I like and a little bit of a challenge to see if I could do it.
Awesome.
So,
That's awesome. That's a great routine
yeah.
you have down. And I know you recently are, advocating for people to start sprinting, right? You recently took that challenge for everyone, and tell us a little bit more about what the concept is behind that.
So, again, it's a big subject. So I've worked out consistently now for a little, probably 25 years almost, but I've tried everything. I've done everything. I was a runner. I did P90X. I've done swimming. I've done biking. I've done, weightlifting, everything. Um, and the one thing is I feel like as an orthopedic surgeon is I think about these patients who we tell them, hey, you got to get in shape, or the primary care doctor says, hey, you got to get in shape. And I feel like for a lot of people, they think, oh, I need to go start running. And the average person, if they haven't run a lot or they're not in shape, actually doesn't enjoy jogging. And running 3 miles at a 10-minute mile pace is not really the most efficient way to get in shape. So ideally, walking is probably something that people are going to stick to. So like the mile you walk is way better than the 4 miles you don't run, is the thing that I
Right.
would say. Like sitting on your couch and running for 3 months and then quitting. But I feel like anybody can get into walking. You can listen to a podcast, you can do it with a friend, you can listen to music. And then if you add sprinting to it. So most of us like quit sprinting when we stop playing sports. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, a lot of kids never play sports. So they really stopped sprinting the last time they probably played tag or hide and go seek or something like that. And sprinting is a really quick workout. It builds strength, it builds lung capacity, heart capacity, but also different than like going for a jog. You don't get the pounding and you stretch your legs out and you build your muscles up. So it's a great addition to, say, a walking program. And it kind of covers all your cardio bases and you can get a great workout in 14 minutes. So if you're like, oh, I don't have time to go for an hour walk, or I don't have time, like when people ride bikes, they're going for like 20-mile bike rides. A
Yeah.
mile bike ride is not going to do much for you. That takes a long time, but you can sprint, and like the workout that I tell people to do takes 14 minutes and 20 seconds. So
Awesome.
that's
You
how I
got it
that's how I
down.
got the idea. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, so let's switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the fact that, as medical professionals, we're well off financially, right? We have a good income. We don't stress out about the next day, and our biggest expenses are probably taxes. Um, there's been a lot of talk about medical professionals getting some sort of a passive income stream from somewhere else. Do you have any kind of strategy in your life to deal with this concept, or preference, I would say, that you want to, get some kind of money while you sleep, like Warren Buffett says?
So so most of my and I preach passive income to my kids all the time. I'm like, that if you want to have money and feel comfortable, it's a lot easier to have passive income. And the one thing that's hard about being a doctor is you generally only bill what you bill what you do. So you have to so for me, I got to see patients, I got to operate. And so I think it's way better to look for passive income and look for opportunities for passive income when you're young. And when you're my kids' age, who are, I guess they're 28 to 20 years old, it's a good idea to start kind of paying attention now to ways to make passive income. So I preach it all the time. In my own life, my biggest passive income is related to medicine. So that would be a surgery center. The surgery center is open. I own part of it. It's making money whether I'm there or not. So
Right.
that's the number one thing. And then also within my practice, you're in a partnership, but also we have our own physical therapy. So, we have a great physical therapy department, but my patient is going to physical therapy and getting treated, whether I'm there or not. And my partner, somebody has to be around, but I don't specifically have to be there. And the thing I love about physical therapy is that people get great benefits from it. But honestly, we all should be in physical therapy. Like there's certain orthopedic issues that are so common that
Yeah.
like low back pain, every single one of us should be doing low back exercises starting the age of 30, 5 minutes to 10 minutes, 3 times a week, because the odds of us getting back pain at some point are so high that we all might as well do it. Another one is like shoulder stuff, like rotator cuff injuries. Almost everybody is going to get rotator cuff problems early in life. And if you just do rotator cuff exercises and stretches starting age 30 or 40, whatever, you can keep yourself out of a ton of problems. So because I believe in therapy so much, I am happy when my patients go there. I'm happy when they get better. And I'm happy to work with great therapists, but it is a passive income stream.
Right. And you're happy you're also happy to get some income. Right.
Yeah. But if I was a patient and
Yeah.
I had a choice between doing some therapy for a couple of weeks and then doing kind of a maintenance program forever, or having surgery, even if the surgery is great, that sometimes you can have a great surgery, but it still takes 6 to 8 weeks to recover. I don't want, that could ruin your summer. So if you're an active person, you don't want to do that.
That's right. It's a good point. And, that's important especially for our audience right now to understand that, you have to find something to get money from other than the medical profession, right? So because you can't work forever. You're going to have to, at some point, slow down or don't take call or whatever it is, right? And base your income off of some source of income outside medicine, or in your case, some related aspects of the medical field. Is there are you involved in any exciting projects right now? Is there anything coming up in the future that you're excited about?
So my main thing that I'm working on the side is basically my website, which is The Real House MD, which has the side thing is the Instagram at Hugh House MD. So although I go by Ty, it's a nickname. So my professional name I go by is Hugh. Nobody's ever actually called me Hugh in real life. Like nobody in my family, my parents, no friends really call me Hugh. But it is my name. So it's Hugh at Hugh House MD. And basically it's orthopedic wellness. And right now it makes no money. But theoretically, as I move towards retirement, if I build it up, there could be ways to make money out of it. But it's basically an orthopedic wellness site where I try to kind of explain to people that your orthopedic ailment is often related to lifestyle. And
yeah, that's interesting.
It's a huge passion for me because think about like most of the surgeries that you and I do together and you do with my partners at the surgery center, they're mostly due to chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation is often due to lifestyle, nutrition, lack of exercise, lack of flexibility. And most people don't correlate the two. So if a middle-aged person comes in, say with a rotator cuff tear, they have a tendency to think, oh, I hurt my shoulder they're not thinking the fact that they kind of wore their rotator cuff out over the years. So the rotator cuff was weak. So whatever happened to it made it more likely to get injured.
Mm-hmm.
Or somebody who has, carpal tunnel, the most common surgery we do, that's related to inflammation. Even some of the fractures we do, like a distal radius fracture, how much of that is, would their bone be stronger if they exercised? Would their bone be stronger if they ate better? Would their agility be better? Anybody can get hurt, but it's different getting hurt crashing on a snowboard than tripping over a curb and breaking your wrist. I mean, I don't want to jinx myself. I don't want to come up with a split next week. But these are all things that if you improve your fitness, improve your nutrition, you could potentially decrease the number of surgeries that you have and decrease the number of injuries you have. So my big thing is as I've been in practice for 20 years, I have patients who have had 12, 15 surgeries over those 20 years. And when you go into orthopedics, you more think that you're going to have that person who gets hurt, they have one surgery, and you don't see them again for 10 years. Or, maybe you see them every once in a while. They come in for their ankle sprain, for their ACL tear, and for their bicep tendonitis or something. But it's not where they're getting 10 surgeries in a 10-year period. And as our society gets more unhealthy, we're having more of that. And I think a lot of the reasons why we're becoming more unhealthy is partly people aren't aware, and partly we were kind of given a lot of bad information in the past. And I feel like the information is really starting to get there where you still need to experiment what works for you. But there's a tremendous amount of information out there about how to live a healthier life.
Yeah, I kind of want to go a little deeper with you into this subject because I know you're passionate about it, and you're talking about the inflammation, and that's the main cause of a lot of issues these days. What would you say your advice would be for someone in general, to take measures to decrease inflammation, starting with nutrition, fitness, whatever you think? What would be the three things that you advise someone to decrease the inflammatory response in his body?
So the first thing is before you do anything, you have to educate yourself. And I always say, and I heard my cousin say it the first time, is that you have a computer in your pocket. So you go to YouTube, you go to Spotify, you go anywhere, you go to Google, you can find a ton of information there. And so how do you get rid of inflammation? It's going to start with diet. So with your diet, though, there's a lot of different anti-inflammatory diets. So you got to go look at all those anti-inflammatory diets, and you got to figure out which one you could do. So say you hate certain foods, that's not going to be the diet for you. So if vegetables are a struggle for you, then being vegan's not going to work for you. If you hate meat, then probably being carnivore is not going to work for you. But what all those diets have in common is they all eliminate sugar, they all eliminate processed carbs, and they basically stick with whole foods. And the problem is you gotta teach yourself, there's tons of videos, tons of information, but you gotta teach yourself how to understand that each person's trying to sell their own diet. So they start kind of bashing the other diets, and you just got to figure out which one is going to work for you, meaning that which one are you going to be able to stick with that has foods that you enjoy. And there's in this day and age, you can go to a supermarket, there's got to be healthy food that you can find that you enjoy. And then you just kind of change your taste buds, you change the way you think about food. My other big thing is you eat more for energy. Too many people have long-term goals of, say somebody's 50 pounds overweight and they want to lose the 50 pounds. That's hard to stay with it in a long-term goal. But if your idea is what can I eat today that is going to give me energy today, where I'm not going to eat a pizza and feel full and fall asleep, want to sleep at my desk, but energy today, then you build those habits and you start eating food that works for you. And then gradually those other goals like losing weight, looking better, those things will all change.
Well, the main issue we deal with these days, right, is that this overflow of fast food everywhere you turn around, right? And it's easy and it's tasty and it's good and it's cheap. What do you do to counteract this wave of food available everywhere you turn around? Because at some point, it's a mental power that you need to have to say no. And most of the time, we don't say no.
So the first thing is that you just get your house in order, which for me is easy because everybody in my home eats pretty healthy. So it's not much of a, we don't have like these snacks for the kids, and then my
Yeah.
wife and I have to resist those snacks. So if everything in your house is pretty healthy, and it does take time to cook dinner, and I'm very lucky because my wife makes dinner or my daughter makes dinner and they eat healthy. So dinner's always good and it's always healthy. And all I have to say is, hey, can you make enough so that I can have more tomorrow for lunch? So that's basically my routine. The thing about avoiding the other stuff is the other stuff is pretty easy to avoid if you have food to eat. The issue is, um, if you don't take your lunch and then you're like, oh, I'm going to get a salad. And you're like, no, I'm not getting the salad. I'm getting the Whopper with cheese kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if you already have a good lunch, so
So,
say you have some leftover, steak and a sweet potato. Are you going to eat steak and a sweet potato and maybe an apple? Or are you going to eat a Big Mac and fries? Well, the steak and sweet potato is going to taste just as good as the Big Mac and fries. You're going to stay with it. But
yeah.
I also think that you should treat yourself. Like you don't have to be perfect. So the thing is, I just like we get ice cream sometimes. There's an ice cream truck that comes to our neighborhood. And if we go down, you've eaten healthy all week, you go down on Sunday night, you get ice cream, and then Monday you're back at it eating healthy. That's very different than having the ice cream in the fridge, because then it's kind of like, and I'm not good at it. If we have chocolate chip cookies around the house, I will pound them until they're gone. But it's not like I miss chocolate chip cookies. If they're not here, I'm not
Yeah.
looking for them.
Yeah. So it has to do with planning a lot, right?
It has to
You're
do
gonna,
with planning, and I have basically two stories to tell about it. The first one was, I joke all the time that Chick-fil-A is a gateway drug, because Chick-fil-A is relatively okay for fast food. But if, like it used to be, I'd go a year without having fast food. This was 10 years ago. I go a year without having fast food and I have Chick-fil-A. I'm like, oh, that was good. And a week later, I'm having Wendy's. And then 2 weeks later, I'm having a Whopper at Burger King kind of thing. It's like once it starts,
yeah,
it's hard to stop. But once you stop it, you replace it with other things. It becomes way, way easier. And I already
interesting.
forgot the
Yeah.
second story
I
I was
I
going to
agree
tell.
with
Oh,
that.
the second story I was going to tell was,
Yeah.
I used to do something where I would challenge myself. So from New Year's Day to Easter, I would try something different. So like it started off with, I wasn't big on eating vegetables. I became a vegetarian just for that period of time to teach myself that there were more vegetables I like. I did the same thing being a pescatarian. So it was just vegetables and fish. I did the same thing with paleo, which paleo is mostly how I eat now. It's basically you can have any meat you want, any vegetable you want, any fruit or nut you want, but you're trying to stay away from like processed carbs and sugar. And then this year I did the carnivore thing, which was interesting. But basically, so I'm super healthy in the winter. Summer, there's just more things going on, more cheats than normal. And then fall, I'm very healthy again. And I used to go from Thanksgiving to Christmas and eat whatever you want. So that's when I would eat whatever cookies are around the office, the surgery center, eat whatever fudge was around the house for Christmas time. We always make Christmas fudge. And around the time I turned 50, I felt like I was 80 years old by the time Christmas came around. My back hurt, my knee hurt, my wrist hurt. It was like I had a little bit of arthritis in my knee. It killed. My back hurt, my tennis elbow hurt, my shoulder bursitis hurt. And I talk to people, and all my friends who are active my age, they all are super sore around Christmas. And it's because of all the sugar.
Yeah.
And now it's to the point that I can tell if I had, like, my daughter's college graduation, it was like beers and nachos every meal starting at 9 o'clock in the morning with cookies and stuff like that. By the end of the weekend, every joint hurt, got home, cleaned up my diet, felt 17 again.
That's awesome. Interesting concept. Yeah, it's very powerful, you know, I can vouch for that. I am in the same situation when I go, you know, on long trips where I'm not home and you don't plan and you don't make lunch and you don't have stuff already made. You put your hands on things that you shouldn't, especially sugary things, and that's very bad. But yeah, once you clean up your diet, you're basically back to square one. Um,
And
I'm
it's
very
not that you
excited
can
about
have
your,
sugary things. It's just make the sugary things worth it. You know, it's a
yeah,
big difference if somebody in your house makes homemade chocolate chip cookies than eating a bunch of Oreos
right,
somewhere, you know?
right. That's very interesting, and I'm happy you talked about your project that you're very excited about your blog. How can people get in touch with you if they want more information?
So the blog is The Real House MD, so www.therealhousemd.com. And my Instagram is at Hugh House MD. And
Awesome.
I honestly have been having a lot of people tell me that I should, one of my good friends and several others have told me I should be doing podcasts the whole time. They're like, nobody wants to read a blog. Dr.
Yeah,
Cluffer's always like, your blog's too long, you know? So I will be doing more stuff on Instagram, and
yeah.
probably in the fall, we'll start doing some podcasting stuff.
Awesome, awesome. I can't wait. And I'm gonna take your sprint challenge very soon.
You
I
should, and
promise.
you should send me a video. And if you if you go to Instagram, you just scroll through them, it's pretty cool. Like there's different people sprinting, and they kind of fit into different categories. So there's people who are, I have a cousin who was a lacrosse player who in her 30s is still a runner and still sprinting. A guy who in my neighborhood had rotator cuff surgery. He can't sprint, but he's walking. Another cousin who broke his foot, so he was doing a sprint challenge in the river, and then when he recovered, in the pool, and then when he recovered, he's sprinting. So there's a bunch of women who are in their 50s sprinting. There's kids who are 8 sprinting. There's kids who are trying to be college lacrosse players sprinting. So it's for everybody. If
Yeah,
you're 60 and you haven't sprinted since you're 25, you don't need to go 100% the first day.
right.
And then you can modify it. You can like walk upstairs or walk up hills. You can sprint on a treadmill. You can sprint in the woods. You can sprint on the beach, wherever you want to do it.
Awesome. I'm gonna do it. I
So
promise.
when's the last time you sprinted?
I don't remember. I don't think I sprint that often. I don't have the
So was it when you were a kid?
opportunity. But if you think about it, I can, I mean, I walk a lot, I bike a lot. But yeah, I can incorporate that anywhere I go now
Yeah.
that I know.
The
And I'll take
funny
a
thing
video of
is
myself.
I thought about it for a long time, and you're like, I'm 55 years old. Do I really want to be sprinting out on the street? People are gonna be like, what's he doing? You know, but you realize you shouldn't care what people think. And
Yeah,
if you do, then do your first couple sprints where nobody can see you. You know,
exactly.
do it in the woods somewhere
And
on a
you
trail.
won't care much after all because your endorphins are going to be shooting up, you know,
Yeah.
right away after the sprinting.
Yeah. I have a
That's
friend who
awesome.
he's turning 60 pretty soon, and he's been sprinting, but he said he wouldn't send me a video until he got good and happy with his form. He wants to look like he did when he was 18. He's a very good athlete, but he was like that first video I'm not sending in. I'm waiting until my form's better.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. House, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show, and I hope we can catch up later during the year and see where your projects is going because that's very exciting.
Yep. I'm very excited about it. That would be great. This was fun.
Thank you so much.
You know, honestly, we should have just recorded our conversations in the OR the last 15 years. I don't know about the
Right, and just
legality
put
of
it on
that,
podcast.
but we've had a ton of good ones.
Awesome. Thank
All
you.
right,
I'll see you
sure.
later.
See ya.
That's a wrap on Stellar Success, Leveling Up for Medical Pros with Dr. Tudor Francu. Interested in joining us? Go to stellarsuccesspodcast.com/guest to apply. Stay stellar and level up.